Have you ever snoozed your alarm clock one too many times and woken up late for work and then rushed to the shower to get ready and forgot to shampoo your hair? So your hair is greasy all day and then you realize you don't even have any fucking hair and you feel really self-conscious about it, so you don't ask for that promotion you feel like you've deserved for a while now, because who would promote somebody already bald in their 20s? They only have like 3 good years left. And then someone else asks for it and gets it, and you never get the job and have less money, so you can't afford a subscription to Netflix, so you start watching way too much YouTube, and now here you are. Well, that's called the butterfly effect. And if it's happened to you, calm down. You've basically just done some cool math. More specifically, you can call it sensitive dependence on initial conditions if you really want to impress your boss. It's the first of many concepts behind the much more all-inclusive concept of chaos. Look, it's 3D printed, it flaps. Chaos. Chaos is something people have always had some notion of, but were never really able to put their finger on its actual nature until recently. In Greek mythology, it is of course a god, but also a concept, both of which came before the universe itself. And in a way, the Greeks weren't far off. If there was a beginning, it was chaos, and chaos is immaterial, a concept that influences the material world. It's hard to say if chaos or matter existed first. That's a question for physicists and philosophers, but I think you'd be hard-pressed to say, at the very least, it wasn't a tie for first. Now, our conceptions of chaos have evolved and become much more well understood through the use of rigorous science. For example, we now know how to spell it correctly. Oh, you silly Greece. Chaos in our modern day also refers to two different things. Chaos in the colloquial sense, today was chaos, and it also has a much more well-defined theory. Chaos theory. These are patterns that seemingly appear everywhere. If your hallucinogen-obsessed friend has ever talked your ear off about fractals, even though you clearly didn't care and kept saying, "That's wild, dude," but they didn't pick up on your disinterest, you've seen it. Or if you've looked at a leaf. Also, at some point in this video, I will talk your ear off about fractals, but don't read too far into that, Mom. I literally just like math. Ordered chaos is the principle behind roguelikes. As many of you know, roguelikes are games that have a world that plops you at the beginning and randomizes itself every time you die, like a brand new version of the same game, and they are unique within the realm of chaos. Chaos in nature is something scientists must contend with, a complication, but in roguelikes, it is the goal. To take something ordered and with a clear structure and make it random and unpredictable. Essentially create endless possibilities, but guarantee those possibilities stay within a certain acceptable bound. For this video, I will not be distinguishing between roguelike and roguelite, because it's fucking stupid. They sound almost the same and describe almost the same kind of game. In my opinion, it's just better to think of them as a spectrum. All of them start you from the beginning every time you die and recreate the world ahead of you, but they have a wide range of different ways in which you can or cannot carry progress between runs. From nothing at all to unlocking new characters to much more straightforward improvements that make you unequivocally more powerful. I also have not played any that genuinely give you nothing that can improve you permanently, so feel free to recommend some in the comments. The level to which randomness plays a role in this particular genre makes for the prime example in gaming of Alright, I'm gonna teach you what the butterfly effect really comes from. You've probably already heard a butterfly flaps its wings in some place and another place there's a whole ass tornado as a result. But that's only part of the story. Back in the 60s, a meteorologist named Edward Lorenz was running one of the first ever computer simulations to simulate a super simple weather system. It would tell him basic stats about precipitation, wind speed, and so on. One day he had to step out of the room mid-simulation to, indefinitely for sure his own words, have like so much sex. And when he came back, he re-entered the data from where he left off. But here's where things get slightly mathy and very wonky. The computer internally stores its data to 6 decimal places, but only prints to 3 decimal places. Meaning when Lorenz re-entered the data, he necessarily rounded it off, thinking such a tiny difference would not make an effect. But the weather system went in a completely different direction than what had previously been recorded with these numbers. Lorenz Lorenz thought perhaps he had had too much sex and reran the numbers many times to make sure what he thought he was seeing was true. And it was true. A fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a percent difference can make even the simplest weather system fly off into unpredictability. At first, this was terrible news for Lorenz because A, this means that the very powerful and numerous sex he just had would surely spawn several hurricanes, and B, it began to feel like meteorology would never be able to make accurate predictions. But Lorenz kept looking at the data, and from it, something beautiful emerged. When he plotted convection currents in a particular way, this pattern took shape. A pattern that closely resembles butterfly wings. Although there was no way to predict for sure where it was going to go as it unraveled, as we have very imperfect human knowledge, we knew there was a track the data would always be attracted to. This later became known as the Lorenz attractor because of Lorenz's attractiveness to women. Some of you may see where this is going already, but some are understandably thinking, what does this have to do with roguelikes, you fat bald piece of shit? Well, let's start with one of my favorite examples, the clock tower in Dead Cells. The clock tower is a vertical labyrinth. Choosing to go in one direction over another has significantly more ramifications than any level that came before. You could spend anywhere from 3 to 8 minutes here, and given the small level sizes in this game, is a huge range. The time you ultimately end up with is entirely dependent on what direction your firing neurons decide for you to go from the outset. You don't really know what you're choosing, just that you're choosing. You may run into multiple dead ends, only to find the door out of the level, not have the key for it, have to scale another part of the tower, and then return. Or you could go straight to the key, then the door, easy peasy. It is a mad scramble for freedom, and all the while, Dead Cells feels chaotic. From start to finish, the soundtrack is full of songs that drive you forward, swift and consistent with no empty space. The way you can slam into the ground and through doors, quick grab ledges and wall jump creates vertical and horizontal momentum that keeps you from thinking too long, reducing you from a contemplating and strategizing player to a force of nature. Particles and enemies fly everywhere, creating strangely clear visual noise. All of it feels so smooth and intuitive, and it just happens. But we're not just talking about the randomness that comes from the player directly interfacing with the game. The world has to be randomly created every time you begin a run. It is random within certain parameters. In Dead Cells, areas have to be structured within a certain style. The clock tower has to be, well, a tower with multiple areas to climb. The ramparts have to be a bunch of underground places to explore, almost an inverted clock tower. And the castle must have areas in which you can collect keys to escape. In addition to all this, there can never be a spot you can't come back out of. This is a glitch game designers usually refer to as a bummer. So given that there are parameters within the randomness, this is the perfect conditions for the butterfly effect to take place. Even more purely than when the players interact with the game. Imagine you're building a house's interior, and the house already has a general shape. The random number generation puts one step somewhere. Well, this one bottom step dictates the location of the entire staircase. Staircases are unlikely to be off the kitchen and more likely to be off a living room, meaning the kitchen has a small number of choices for its space, and the upstairs now has to account for where these stairs are and is limited to a subset of its room configurations. So much of the structure of this house has been dictated by the random placement of a single step. This is exactly the same kind of butterfly effect that occurs in level generation, computer-generated chaos. But how much does this genre extend beyond the kinds of randomness we've already discussed? The game I will reference most in this video is Hades. Hades is one of my favorite games of all time and embodies the things I've been talking about in this video so well. But what Hades does the best, in my opinion, is incentivizing the players to choose randomness. Not in the moment-to-moment sense of the flowing gameplay from Dead Cells, but what I consider the harder problem, to suck them away from their tried and true methods, ones they have plenty of time to consider before a run even begins, even when they remain available throughout the entire game. It does this in 3 different ways. One is just a base bonus to currency collected that is randomly assigned to one weapon every run. Another is filling out various requirements for the fates and effectively experiencing everything. And a third is that switching between both difficulty or heat levels, of which there are a great variety, and different weapons can grant you vital currencies you couldn't otherwise get. Additionally, these fated rewards continue after a run begins. They're pretty pervasive throughout the entire game. They are essentially predictions made by the Greek gods, the Fates, that you are rewarded for filling out. It'd be essentially like a fortune teller making a prediction about you, then promising to slip you an Olive Garden gift card if you made them correct. But they make predictions about basically everything you can do in the game, and also that you will eventually do all of it. For example, the gods will grant you boons as you go through that give you different abilities. You have a list of moves that includes a regular attack, special attack, a dash strike, a ranged cast, and a call. Each of these can be modified by one of the 9 main gods. That is 9 possibilities for each of the 6 moves, resulting in over 500,000 combinations, and that is by no means all available upgrades. With all the various weapons and boons included, we are well into the millions of combinations. Now, you obviously don't need to acquire millions of variations, but getting every one of these individually is rewarded by the Fates. In fact, there's no playstyle you aren't handsomely rewarded for at least trying. This effectively creates a loop where the player is simultaneously freer to choose their build than in any other roguelikes I've played, and extremely likely to wind up with the same level of randomness from run to run as something completely randomized like The Binding of Isaac. This is not to say other roguelikes don't try this. It actually appears to be pretty common. For example, we'll talk more about Downwell later, but for now, there is a health or ammo upgrade attached to each of the different kinds of shots. But sometimes you feel a bit bummed if you end up with one you don't like, and I never really got this feeling in Hades. I think that is exactly why this game is so critically and commercially successful. Other roguelikes randomness ask you to sleep with them because it's their birthday. You sleep with the randomness in Hades because it's your birthday. It wants to make sure you never really settle into a cycle, and it really doesn't take much to break a cycle. Here's another thing from our boy Lorenz. This is a Lorenz wheel. Scientists 60 years ago would have said if you keep a constant amount of water flowing, it will either spin one way forever or oscillate back and forth in a predictable manner. But given what you've already learned so far in this video, you probably already know that their theory has a first name and it's baloney. Tiny fluctuations and inconsistencies cause this wheel to never settle. It behaves erratically because of factors we would intuitively think were too small to even make a dent. This is somehow overwhelming and also somewhat comforting, which is why I'm sitting on this couch. It's symbolic for comfort. Because even if the world is some deterministic clock plummeting towards an inevitable outcome, it is a clock with so many gears it just becomes meaningless to us. It might as well be random. The world still feels alive to us because it's not something we can comprehend. And I think this is one of the many reasons that randomness is so attractive to us. It just feels right. The illusion of a butterfly effect is something a lot of non-roguelike games like Outer Worlds strive for. They want to give you the feeling that a decision you've made has had a ripple effect throughout the entire world. The Witcher 3 goes out of its way to do this by not immediately showing you the results of your actions. It frequently makes you wait 10 hours to show you what you've done. It really gives you the impression that these events you've set in motion have continued churning independent of your presence. But what these systems lack is a true sense of randomness. Every path, no matter how plentiful, has been carved ahead of time. They don't follow the pattern of controlled chaos, the patterns that roguelikes try to copy much more directly, creating a system rather than an illusion. They aren't just trying to keep you on a certain track, they form an unpredictability that is addictive. It is perfectly reasonable to have a run where you are massively overpowered due to random luck, because that is only a sliver of the game. It's not ruining the entire difficulty curve, but knowing any run might be your luckiest yet keeps you playing. The patterns of chaos we've been hinting at here are vital to understanding our reality, despite the fact that there may not be anything actually random or unpredictable about our world at all. Imagine the thought experiment you've probably either heard a billion times or none at all. Laplace's demon. Laplace was a mathematician and physicist that put forward the idea of an all-knowing, hyper-intelligent being that could know the location and information of every particle in the universe. From this, they could figure out everything that did and would happen. Now, A, the discovery of quantum mechanics made this idea fuzzier, but we will talk more about that later, and B, we are not at all even close to Laplace's demon. Even all working together, we just make one big idiot in comparison. We even fall short start in the simplest example. A coin flip can technically be predicted every time given all needed information, but we don't have that, so we've done our best approximation and assigned a 50-50 shot to coin flips. We view things that could technically be calculated through percentages, and consider them random because we have to use approximations, and look for patterns to learn about and predict things in the world around us. But what are these patterns? Hades is truly the perfect game for this video. Not just because of its mechanics, but the Greek god Chaos is literally in the fucking game. And the way they talk about themselves implies a knowledge and understanding of true chaos. Even starting with their character design. Wrapped around their neck are what appear to be failed attempts at human faces, showing the road of chaos that brought us the final product. They talk about how Ares, the god of war, believes chaos is on his side, but he doesn't truly understand them.
It is not unexpected that you consorted with the violent Ares and now bear his boon. He still worships me, you know. Yet I would say he does not know me very well.
Referencing this idea that chaos can both create and destroy, and it is not its goal to do either, it just lets things play out. But we always refer to chaos as destructive despite the order within it. The way they factor into gameplay follows a similar trend. They even directly point it out as well.
The Olympians are vying for your favor, are they not? So often they forget themselves. They force their blessings onto you, whilst I merely offer you a choice.
Talking about how the other gods just give you something. You have the choice between their improvements, but those improvements are thrust upon you. Chaos gives you a choice. First, you can choose to go into his realm or not, and when you do choose to do so, you take damage. Then when you actually choose your gift from him, it starts as a debuff for 3 to 5 rooms before switching to an upgrade. The way Chaos hands you a positive and a negative like this, it's like they're handing you nothing. You have to strip away the negative to get the positive, the same way the Greeks believed the universe to be born of nothing. These, though, like many upgrades, are confined to each individual run. In Hades, there are an incredible number of ways you can improve and gain progress over the long term. They are, but are not limited to, various upgrades to unlock in this mirror, different weapons, different versions of those weapons, upgrading those versions of those weapons, equipping the underworld with healing chambers and the like, forming relationships with characters that give you rewards, upgrading those rewards, and getting currency from the fates for doing everything I listed up to this point to continue to upgrade things. These all allow for something else that can create large ripple effects, not just within runs, but through the entire game. Each run's output creates a whole slew of new inputs for the next one, linking the pre-existing randomness within runs themselves. Like a big butterfly made up of smaller butterflies, who are also made up of butterflies. Boggles the mind. Which is made of butterflies, but this is necessary in varying degrees to actually fall into the category of chaos. True randomness is not a chaotic system. The randomness has to be part of an actual structure. For example, there's a part towards the end of every Hades run where you have to get Cerberus a snack to get him to move out of the way, because Cerberus is adorable and fighting him would be fucked up. So you have 5 different chambers to choose from, and at the end of one is the snack. You can tell it's a snack because it's roughly the same shape as me. The fact that this area connects with the end of the run and the run up to that point is what causes it to fall under the category of chaos. On its own, each room has an equal, presumably, I didn't look at the code, chance of containing the satyr sack for Cerberus. The contents of each room are also mostly random. Without outside context, it's more closely related to drawing cards till you get the one you want than a weather system. With the outside context, you carry everything that happened to you in the run up to that point to these rooms, giving you either an advantage or a disadvantage and determining whether it's better to fight through more chambers to get more upgrades, or to hopefully find it early and make it to the final boss with some health intact. Chaotic systems are more of a middle ground between predictability and unpredictability. Many of these systems have an end they are headed towards despite the randomness on the way. A cup of coffee will always return to room temperature, but the temperature at each moment until then cannot be predicted exactly. This is basically the principle behind Downwell. Downwell is a desperate attempt to control the inevitable. You do everything in your power to plummet correctly, strategically stomping on enemies and shooting out your boots for some weird medical reason to slow down your fall as you go. And this plummeting is the only thing that matters. A combo counter sits above your head that can only be interrupted by landing. It still chugs along after taking a hit because it's all about working within gravity's terms, not fighting them. Just don't land. Landing is fucking boring. It shows that even the most seemingly chaotic systems can have an end state. This is a double pendulum, a fidget spinner double pendulum, and one I had to purchase because the one I 3D printed sucked. Now, this seems pretty chaotic. Its counterpart, however, a single pendulum, is a boring linear system. It swings predictably back and forth until it finds a resting place in the center. This double pendulum puts on a fucking show. As one part swings, it affects the swing of the other part, and then that part affects the swing of the first, and so on. It would be an infinite feedback loop if it never came to rest. This is what makes it a chaotic system, one that is extremely dependent on its initial conditions. Chaos, Making a New Science, talks of a simulation that was done with a double pendulum that proved the gravitational pull of a single raindrop a mile away can throw this into a completely different cycle after just 60 seconds. It just keeps feeding back, one part's output serving as the input for the next, multiplying every tiny change. And if we want to be able to visualize this complexity, we have to look at fractals. Mandelbrot is one of the most underrated mathematicians of all time. No one respected him for a good portion of his career. He didn't think like other mathematicians with pure numbers. He preferred to use shapes and not just the conventional Euclidean ones with a bunch of straight lines. When asked why he didn't think like other mathematicians, he definitely said, and I quote, "I like my numbers like I like my women, curvy. Oh, and just call me Mandelbrot." And then he turned to High Five Lorenz. By using this way of thinking, he fleshed out the idea of fractals as we know them today. They have two defining aspects, their patterns and self-similarity and their dimensionality. They quite literally can be used in mathematics as another spatial dimension, or at least part of one. Fractal dimensions are like zooming in on something. You know how if you were to zoom in very close on, say, this microphone, you would begin to see microscopic textures you can't see from all the way back there. There would be tiny cracks that reveal more surface area than originally thought. Zoom in even further and you'd find those cracks had cracks. You could keep going all the way down to the molecular level. If you were to measure the total circumference at each stage in magnification, it would grow every time you zoomed in further to reveal more detail. The line you'd have to draw to cover its circumference would grow extremely long and complicated, limited only by the smallest units of matter. And then we have the idea of self-similarity. This is not present in all fractals, some are defined just by their dimensionality. But self-similarity is a necessity in understanding the certain patterns in our world. The book Chaos, Making a New Science, which I highly recommend reading if you're interested in this stuff, talks about our perception of self-similarity in an interesting way. It points out how people used to think almost exclusively in the ideas of self-similarity, believing things on larger and smaller scales were the same as everything else in the world, just, well, larger or smaller. For example, people used to think sperm were tiny, fully formed humans, which is actually horrifying. But then as we learned more about the world, we found stars and galaxies to be very unlike our own Earth, and atoms to be similarly distinct from us. So we did away with the idea, but then enter the Mandelbrot set. This is an extremely straightforward way of constructing a fractal, using an equation no more complex than something we would learn about in middle school. Plotting the points of this simple equation creates this. As you zoom in, it seems random, and like it's just spiraling out like columns of smoke. But it keeps repeating. You keep seeing the same patterns arise no matter where you choose to zoom in. It is comprised of itself. And this isn't a mathematical anomaly, this is everywhere in nature. Leaves, our own lungs, pine cones, snowflakes, and the list most assuredly goes on. These things all follow a pattern of chaos, and to really understand them, a fractal is the only way. The lungs were previously believed to increase their surface area exponentially, but now we know that they actually increase in the fractal dimension. The way snowflakes form, I think, is the best analogy to describe the random generation of a roguelike. I feel like I can make this educated guess even though I don't have experience being a mathematician, because according to my YouTube comments, I do have experience being a snowflake. The different fingers and crystals of snowflakes form as a result of minute temperature and atmospheric differences as it descends to the Earth. But the entire snowflake experiences these conditions at the same time. So despite its seemingly random structure, it remains symmetrical to itself. It seems to me a roguelike world also forms according to random conditions, but must remain consistent and functional within its own bounds. But there are some things holding roguelikes back from truly forming something like a system of nature. They are first and foremost games. Weather cannot learn to be better at being weather, and it doesn't get upgrades to increase the diameter of hail or the wind speed of tornadoes, as it desperately tries to kill us before we kill it. It follows patterns based on its initial conditions. Patterns that within a short enough time scale and a contained climate will repeat. Never exactly the same way, but that is the purpose of an attractor, to show what the pattern is pulled towards. Winning or better aren't even really sensible words to use when talking about a natural system. And a natural system doesn't open up its chaotic elements to you in a manner that won't be too overwhelming. There's no butterfly tutorial before you learn to tornado. It all just is. But at the end of the day, a roguelike has to be a game that wants you to win. It has to have a set of goals that are dwindled into smaller and smaller numbers, even as the variables and randomness of the rest of the game increases. As incredibly chaotic as they can never really simulate nature. They can merely adopt its principles and then cut them short when they cross the line. But we want to simulate nature in a way. We want to do this with games like Outer Worlds and Fallout, but that can only go so far. Roguelikes are the closest thing we can get to a living, breathing system, while still being what a game must be: fun. Chaos serves no one. A game must serve the player. But if all this randomness bothers you, the idea that most things that could happen just fall by the wayside for a teeny tiny sliver of potential reality, boy do I have something even more uncomfortable for you. There might be an insanely or even infinitely many versions of you. And I know this sounds like I just did a line of coke when the video was supposed to be over and just kept going, but this is actually called the many worlds theory of quantum mechanics. Sean Carroll wrote an amazing book on it called Something Deeply Hidden. This is not the simplest thing in the many world to explain, so please stick with me here. There's a problem in quantum mechanics, and that problem is that it doesn't make any fucking sense. Not just to me or you, but to physicists too. They can make predictions with it, but have no idea why. Imagine you're a physicist in a lab coat. Only a lab coat. Imagine you're a naughty physicist. You want to make a prediction based on the conditions around this electron on whether it will be spinning up or down. In hopefully the same way you would make predictions about which way a baseball would spin depending on how the pitcher threw it, using classical, old-fashioned physics. You quickly find there is no way to do this. You rush to the chapter in your physics book you skipped and somehow still became a quantum physicist because you got by on being mostly naked, and it is about the double slit experiment. Basically, scientists shot electrons through two slits, once without measuring them at the slit, and the other measuring them as they passed through the slit. You get two very different patterns. When you take a measurement at the slit, they behave like good old American baseballs, forming two bands on the other side. But when you didn't measure them as they went through, they formed a pattern like they were waves of water. They existed as waves of probability until we measured them. Then they took on definite characteristics just like everyday objects. This same thing happens with an electron's spin. Until you naughty physicist measures them, they are spin up and spin down at the same time. All we can do is estimate the percentage chance we will see a particle in a certain place or with a certain behavior when we do measure it. That is the wave function they picked up in the experiment. It proved this wave exists as a physical thing, not just a means for guessing position. If you think this sounds stupid and wrong, you are not alone. The people that pioneered it thought so too. Carroll in his book points out that the Schrodinger's cat thought experiment was not Schrodinger's way of explaining quantum mechanics. It was his way of saying, this doesn't make any fucking sense, and also I hate cats. For those unfamiliar, it was the idea that you could put an atom that could decay in a box with a cat in a poison vial that was set to release if the atom decayed. Due to the probability wave particles exist in, the vial of poison would be opened and not opened until a measurement was taken. The cat was alive and dead simultaneously. Many ideas have been thrown around to try and figure out a sensible way to explain this, all of which have to introduce some outside things into the existing equations to make them make sense to us. Except one. The many worlds theory, as complicated as it may seem, simply looks at the wave that represents reality with all its possible outcomes and says, yes. It says all of it happens. And it has a pretty good explanation for Schrodinger's cat, too. It basically says that a particle not affecting its outside surroundings doesn't have to take on definite characteristics. But the atom that decays in this experiment does affect its surroundings. It affects the macro world we can see with our own two eyes. This process is called entanglement. When that particle decays or doesn't decay, it causes the sensor to pick up a decay or not, causing the poison to open or not, causing the cat to be dead or not. This butterfly effect is known as decoherence, and when it happens, our reality splits in two. There's a universe with an alive cat whose owners will never know Schrodinger stole it for the experiment, and one where Schrodinger has to make up a story about how it ran into the road and he tried to swerve, but tragically it still got poisoned. Before this gets any more complicated, let's talk about the case where each universe is equally likely. To do so, we first have to establish what exactly causes the universe to branch. You may think every time you make a decision this is the case, but it's really not that simple, and it seems, in general, our brain does not run on quantum mechanics as far as we know, so it mostly works with old school chemistry. What we know for sure splits the universe in this theory is quantum measurements. In the book, Sean Carroll says we shouldn't imagine that making a difficult decision splits the world into multiple copies, each containing a version of you that shows differently. Unless, of course, you don't want to take responsibility and turn your decision making over to a quantum random number generator. And that's what we're gonna do. Let's play through a run of Hades and branch the universe every time I make a hard choice using the universe splitter app Carroll talks about in his book. When I press this button, a photon in a lab across the world is measured, and we become Schrodinger's cat. It hits a mirror and either bounces off of it or doesn't, becoming entangled with its environment and causing a chain reaction in the macro world that ultimately is displayed on your screen here. According to the many worlds theory, there are now two of me holding two different phones and two different versions of you watching two different versions of this video. The photon did and didn't bounce. Okay, let's put the photon to work and let it make all the hard decisions in a Hades run. Okay, so every time I have a hard choice, I am going to use the universe splitter to deem one of the choices first choice, one of the choices second choice. And then I will choose the one the universe splitter chooses for me in both universes, if the Eveready and Many Worlds theory is true. These are different keepsakes, different characters give them to you, and they result in different boosts. Given I have the bow, I either want to do the Zeus one or the Artemis one. Zeus is first choice, Artemis is second. And we are in the Artemis universe. I actually am thinking about streaming at some point, so please let me know if you'd be interested in that. So the reason I'm taking damage is it's actually a speedrunning tactic. So originally I was using a different app called Quantum Dice, which allows you to choose like different numbers of sides to the die, but I found out that Quantum Dice is a quantum lie because it is not using a real quantum computer to simulate these dice. It is using a regular computer to simulate a quantum computer to simulate the dice. So I coughed over the $2 and got the much cooler Universe Splitter app, which is not a lie. Oh my god. Guys, this is Thanatos. He's a Greek god. He's derived from the English word for Thanos, which means hello and goodbye. Oh, I think this is the boss, baby. The boss, baby. This is the part where you fight the boss, baby. So, for those of you that don't know, you pick one god, you get their boon, and then the other god is not cool about it. Second choice. Alright. I also hate these because I don't like feel like I'm hurting their feelings. You know how anger always comes with a different emotion? They're not just angry, they're hurt. First choice, second choice. Choice A. Alright, I found the Satyr sack already. I would have found it on my first try. Well, I did in the other universe. I found it on my first try. Which means the guy in the other universe has a better chance at beating Hades than I do right now, and that is upsetting. This looks silly, but it's very effective. Dead. Oh my god, you guys, you were in for a treat here. So I am going to end the run here, because I did a successful run, no big deal. And I'm going to count up the amount of different universes that came out, and then I'm going to write that down, and then I will tell you. Wait, I think this means we bang. Yeah, okay, that's a good note to end on. The app was kind enough to show how many different splits this run created. Over 65,000 different universes and 16 splits. One of these came from before I started the game when I was deciding whether to stop brainstorming and pacing like someone who recently scored pretty high on an OCD test, not to brag, or to move on with my day and exercise. It landed on exercise. The version of me that kept brainstorming did not finish this run in time and had to redo it on another day, as this version of me almost ran out of time. This must have created a huge ripple effect throughout my day and week. The portion of this that takes place after the split occurs, I think, is much easier for us to wrap our heads around. Mainly because it all takes place in our universe. But I think there's something else that makes this all so mind-bending. According to this theory, I think the reason Schrodinger's cat is so counterintuitive to us is because we are used to interacting with the macro world, where everything is a large collection of probabilities that come out to averages that look normal to us. This experiment is an example of allowing the macro world to play by the rules and probabilities of a single particle, leaving it up to one single point of chance. This is the difference between a single coin flip determining reality and the average of trillions of coin flips determining reality. We know the average will be roughly 50-50, and that represents all of the large-scale systems we see. We are used to seeing, at least as far as the laws of physics are concerned, what we expect to see. And large averages, like all of the particles making up a car or a person, will approximate that. But here, that entire world hinges on just one coin flip. Even without scenarios like Schrodinger's cat, though, some really strange implications come from the many worlds theory. Things that are extremely unlikely will happen. Like all trillion coin flips came up heads or tails or some precise and equally unlikely combination of the two. This can lead to some seemingly impossible events, like someone passing straight through a wall or never once petting Cerberus in Hades. Not only could it be, but it would be inevitable. How can something be extremely unlikely and inevitable? Essentially what happens is, if there's a 30% chance of a particle being here and a 70% chance of it being here, both things will happen, but the branches of the universe will not be equal. Combined, they will add back up to the energy level of the original universe they branched from, as conservation of energy is a rule that must be followed. Imagine the original universe is this pie. It gets sliced like this, and 30% of reality goes to the less likely outcome, while 70% goes to the more likely outcome. Same amount of pie, unequally sliced. But these pie pieces are served without context in their respective realities, so no one can tell they got the smaller slice. They all just know they got a slice of pie. The universe appears as it always does. So extremely unlikely events like beating the entire game on your first try are an imperceptibly small slice of pie, but possible. In fact, I had to redo a lot of my gameplay footage because the hard drive I had it all on broke. And when I went to play Binding of Isaac, I beat the entire game and the 3 added bonus levels on my first try after a month of not playing it at all. I had never done that before. I had only ever beaten the much easier main game, but you can imagine even more unlikely scenarios than that. There's a world where I'm still trying to beat these games and haven't even released this video yet. What can happen will happen, but what can't happen doesn't. So there's no universe where an electron becomes a proton, or you run faster than the speed of light, or faster than me, or one where your dad is stronger than mine. But all of this is to say, there's a part of us that loves chaos, that loves possibility. Gambling is addictive because it takes the most addictive part of life and distills it down to its most potent form. We are always hoping for the best outcome. Every day we wake up pulling on a slot machine. Chaos gives us hope. Even in our worst times, we know we could win the lottery or find the right person and everything could be turned around. This is what roguelikes tap into. They take from the randomness in nature. Even if, as Many Worlds says, all of it happens every time, this version of you is the only one to experience this, and to be here with this version of me now. We get to take part in something massive, and being in just one part makes it exciting and gives it meaning. To have everything would be to be surprised by nothing. Laplace's demon would just ruin our fun. I mean, it's literally a demon. Alright guys, that's the video. If you want to learn more about all this stuff, given I just scratched the surface, check out the links in the description. If you still want to know more after that, go to college. If you liked the video, please like, subscribe, and consider becoming one of my patrons. With more on that, here's my marketing manager / girlfriend.
Hi everyone, I'm Kay. I'm Jared's marketing manager / girlfriend. I'm here to talk to you about a few new opportunities to support us, and by us, I mean me. I had a hard time finding the perfect sugar daddy, so I've decided to build one from the ground up, or like under the ground up. What's a negative money called? The point is, there's several new opportunities to spend your money on Jared, so he can spend his money on me. First, there's some new merch on the Patreon, so if you're in the top tier, after 3 months, you're going to get a mug. I would call it a free mug, but that's like 3 months of Patreon. It's not exactly free. I can't show you what the mug looks like because I haven't got the sample yet, but I'm sure it looks very cool and it holds lots of coffee. Also, we're starting our own little merch shop on the Facebook shop. Link in the description, probably, right, Jarrett? And so here's a few things that we're going to be selling in the shop. Look, now I'm the bear. This is a decal, which you can stick onto walls or cars or pretty much whatever you want. According to the place I bought it, it is reusable. I have not tried to do that, and I don't trust that it really is. So put it somewhere you're going to like forever. We also have these bumper stickers, snazzy. Show your friends how cool you are. Have it on your car. Ooh, it rhymed. Show your friends how cool you are. Have it on your car. We also have these regular refrigerator magnets, which are cute. Cute. You can also get some sew-on patches of the logo, which you can put on your purse or your shirt or your pants, probably right on your butt, because that's where people are going to be looking, and that's great marketing. And finally, we have these super limited edition stuffed bears, which are made by me. So I don't know how to sew, so that's why they're very limited edition. We'd like to expand our opportunities with merch, but we're trying to really have no slavery involved in our process, so we can't mass order until we can put in a bigger bulk order. Anyway, they're cute, so I say you should get on that, even if I don't know what I'm doing. Huh? Anyway, if you want to support Jarrett with just money, you can always make a one-time donation on Venmo, which will be on the screen and also in the link description thing. Or you can do a more consistent donation on Patreon, where you can get a snazzy mug, or if you donate less money but still monthly, you can get stickers. And you can have your question answered at the end of the video, and you can see videos that are Patreon exclusive. All jokes aside, I do want to say that Jarrett puts a lot of time and money into these videos. For this video alone, he read like 3 different books, and we got a 3D printer and we printed a pendulum, and he couldn't just get footage online because he's like, he really wants to have all his own footage, artistic integrity, all that good stuff. And he's really passionate about this. He puts so many hours into it, and he really, I think, deserves to be making a living on this. And if you agree with me, it would be great if you could support the channel in one of the aforementioned ways. Back to you, Pancakes.
Thank you, Hotcakes. I would like to give special thanks to my patrons, Mackenzie Berg, Connor Dean, Motier Haskins, Phil Farda, Maura Becker, and Quesadilla. And here is the question of the video, asked by Quesadilla. Would you rather spend the next year as a platypus or be literally invisible for the next 3? So this is dependent on 2 major things for me. Can I talk as a platypus? Because if I can talk as a platypus, then definitely that. I would be able to retire with the YouTube money as a talking platypus, but I'm guessing, I'm going to assume I can't talk as the platypus. In that case, would everything I touch be invisible too? Like, would I just be a floating voice? Or the funnier option to me is that I'm invisible, but you can still totally tell the shirt's being worn by a big fat guy. So I guess my answer would be invisible, given what I assume about the questions. If you guys want to ask a question, it's one of my Patreon tiers, so go check that out. It's in the description. Thanks again for watching. I don't know why I saluted. That was weird.